Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Z and J.W podcast. I'm J.W. Stewart, a veteran broadcaster and journalist with nearly 30 years experience. I've worked at ESPN and NBC, and now I teach at the University of New Haven.
And I'm Sheahon Zenger, Director of Athletics at the University of New Haven, previously the same position at the University of Kansas and Illinois State University. Prior to that, I spent many years in athletic administration and just as many years coaching college football. Welcome to the Dr. Z and J.W podcast.
And hi again, everybody, and welcome back to the Dr. Z and J.W podcast. We thank you for joining us across all of our social media platforms today. As always, our podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. We're real excited for our guest today. Our guest today is Dave Wallace, who spent 51 years in baseball across all levels as a pitcher and a coach and a front office executive and an advisor. Around here in New England, he's best known as the pitching coach of the Boston Red Sox from 2003 to 2006, which means that he was on that World Series championship team in 2004 where the Red Sox broke the curse of the Bambino and won their first World Series in 86 years. Dave actually has 3 World Series rings, and he's in our UNH Hall of Fame. He's one of the best pitchers in University of New Haven school history. So we'll get to Dave in just a few minutes. He's hanging out back in the green room. Dr. Z, we didn't see each other last week during the first week of school. Things got a little busy. How you doing today?
Good. You know, that's a good sign that it was that busy. You know, you were busy with classes. We were busy over here on this side getting all the student athletes reacclimated. And that's a good sign that things are almost normal. Not quite, almost.
Absolutely. Well, here we are on September the 3rd, 2020, as we record this podcast. So we're about almost 2 full weeks through school. How have things gone for you guys over on North Campus and our student athletes and their reacclimation to our campus in West Haven?
You know, knock on wood, the best way I can sum it up is I'm just really proud of these young people and what they've done to get back here after the spring and summer. They've done everything they've been instructed, from wearing their masks to staying socially distant to, you know, I understand they're college students. They want to be social, but they're doing it within the safe realms of safe parameters, I should say. So really proud of them, proud of the whole campus. You know, I just got off a conference call with a number of other schools that don't seem to be having the experience we do. And I don't know, I think we've got a lot of momentum going right here. And it starts at the top with President Kaplan and his cabinet and so on and so forth, on down through our faculty, staff, coaches, et cetera. And I mean down in terms of the actual in contact with students, you know. And just really, really proud of this place and the leaps and bounds we've made, as we've talked before, record enrollment. And, you know, no one would have predicted that last March.
No, the leaps and bounds have come in a relatively short period of time, right? From March 9th when we all went home, right through the end of the semester, and then the summer, which was busy for everybody. So for many people, myself included, you know, last Monday was our first day on campus since that day in March when President Kaplan and the school made the decision to close the campus and send everybody home. It was a joy, Dr. Z, a true joy to be back in the classroom and be back on campus and see the students. And the first question I asked, I'm teaching 3 classes this semester, the first question I asked my students, you know, how are you feeling? Are you nervous? Are you anxious? And they all said no. They all said, we're glad to be here. We're glad to be on campus. We're glad to be out of, you know, mom and dad's house. Not that there's anything wrong with living with mom and dad, but as we've discussed before in this show, a huge part of college is the socialization aspect and getting here and meeting people, you know, who come from different backgrounds, may have different viewpoints than you do. Yeah. But all the students, you know, through the first 2 weeks that I've talked to them, you know, are very happy to be here and very happy to continue their education, which I think speaks to the quality and the caliber of student that we attract here to the University of New Haven. We've talked about that many times before, but they are grinders and they're hard workers. And so I guess I really shouldn't be surprised that, you know, they're just focused on, you know, on getting the job done and, you know, and succeeding in the classroom.
Yeah, and again, really proud of them. They're just a special group of young people. And, you know, I wouldn't be an educator in this business if I didn't believe in them. It's what we do for a living. And, you know, I told our student athletes on a Zoom call, a group meeting last week, that, you know, you're the kids of car seats and bike helmets and September 11th and the pandemic. And that's a lot to put on somebody, but they've made it through, and they're our future. And I think they're resilient. I think they're tough. I think they're creative. And they also have a heart for others that, I think the last few generations have kind of been migrating that way. There's a real sense of giving back amongst them and taking care of others. And, so often generations speak ill of the next one coming up, and I just refuse to do that. I don't see any issues. I just see a bunch of young people who are weathering the storm and getting tougher by the day and will one day lead us.
Yep. Yeah. And if that's the case, and that will be the case when they do lead us, I feel very confident in the future of our country and our world with the students, the type of students we have here at the University of New Haven. Of course, you're a father of 3 as well, and 2 of your students are still in college. So what has their transition been like back to college life? Because they're not here in Connecticut. They're in other parts of the United States.
They are, and they're in hot spots, and they're kind of dodging around those. And, bottom line, they're with their friends. And some of their classes are in person and some are online. But no, that's what college is all about. And they're back there enjoying it. And, you just take it, as we've said many times, day by day. And that's part of my daily checklist. How are the kids? How are they doing? And again, our oldest is back with us for his final stint of studying for the CPA. And again, a testament to West Haven. He came back for 2 weeks and he stayed in another one. Maybe it's because, we've shown him a good time down there on the Westy Beach,
We've done the celebration of West Haven, right? That was a 2-part episode that we did. I think if that doesn't sell people on how beautiful this area of the country is and this area of our state, I don't know what else does. I mean, you sitting on Prospect Beach, right, was where you were that one time on remote.
Yep.
It's hard to pass that up. My first day on campus, I actually decided to take a drive down to the beach to eat my lunch that one day. So it's hard to beat that view, Dr. Z, when it makes the food taste a little bit better when you're staring out at the ocean.
Well, J.W., before we bring Coach on here, I've been to your hometown of Newport Beach. I've been to Watch Hill now. I've been to Block Island. I've been to Port Jeff, and they're all awesome. And everyone asks me how it is. Hey, this is great. But you know what? I had to drive an hour, a half hour, or 2.5 hours, whatever. All I got to do is go down into I've got sand and water just down by my house. What is this sand and water different? And I know people are probably going to scream at me, those of you from Rhode Island. Hey, I'm from the Midwest, sand, water, and a beach bar and grill like the Dive Bar, and I'm a happy camper. That's all I really need.
Yeah. No, I mean, for me, being from Newport, Middletown, Rhode Island, the beaches back home are beautiful, but I would say the beaches here that we have in Connecticut, especially in our backyard in West Haven, are just as beautiful. I don't, if there's a difference, there's not much of a difference. I'll tell you that.
Yep. Love it. The difference is it's close.
Yeah, exactly. You could walk there and walk back.
Yeah, that's right.
Before we bring Dave out, I wanted to remind all of our alums, of which, of course, Dave is an alum of our school, about the Centennial Ball, which is coming up real quick in about a month's time on Saturday, October the 3rd. Of course, it'll be held virtually this year as we celebrate the 100th birthday or 100th anniversary of the University of New Haven. We want to encourage all of our alums to register, and the price this year, very reasonable, just $25 per person. The cost will go for a lot of things, but primarily to our $120 million Charger Challenge goal, which is part of the overall campaign for the University of New Haven. That night, we got a lot of stuff planned. We have some interviews, we have student showcases, entertainment, a live auction, a lot more things that we'll reveal here on the podcast and also on the website. So for more information on the Centennial Ball or for how to register, go to newhaven.edu/alumni. I mentioned our next guest is a proud UNH alum. He is in our Hall of Fame. He's one of the best pitchers in school history, so it's no surprise he went on to pitch in the major leagues and really had his biggest success as a pitching coach in the major leagues. And that's Dave Wallace. And Dave has 3 World Series rings, 2 with the Dodgers and 1 with the 2004 Red Sox. And Dave joins us now here on the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. Dave, it's great to finally meet you. Welcome aboard. How are you?
Well, I'm great, especially when I listen to you guys talk about the beaches, because that's tremendous stuff. I love the beach myself, so it makes me think of those days back in West Haven where there was no dorms. We lived in Milford, Ronnie Diorio, myself, and a few other guys, and we had our little fun times on the beach. So it was great.
Yeah, Dave, for those who don't know, Dave is from Waterbury, Connecticut, so not too far away from our campus in West Haven. Dave, how did you get to UNH? You know, back then things were so much different in the 1960s in recruiting. How did you end up playing for Porky Vieira back in the day?
Well, I remember being Sacred Heart High School in Water, playing some high school games, and unbeknownst to me, that here's Coach Vieira sitting in the stands watching a game or two. Next thing you know, my dad says, "Hey, let's take a ride down. Coach V wants to meet with us down in New Haven, and there's some other schools involved as well." But it was a tough time in our life because my mom had been sick at that point, and I wanted to stay close to home. And I did some research about the baseball program at UNH, and I was convinced that was a place. And we came to an agreement. And he actually, well, we didn't come to an agreement. He came to another game, and then luckily I had a pretty good game. So he made a nice little offer, and he and Don Ormrod, who was the AD at the time, both got involved in the interview process. And I remember at that time we physically had to sign a paper for a scholarship and that kind of stuff. So it was fun.
What was the school like back in those days, Dave? Because most of our audience who listens and watches this podcast, are familiar with how it looks now. The university constantly is changing and improving. But what was it like back when you were there in the '60s? You said no dorms. What else was it like?
Well, there were no dorms, but they had just finished. I think it was the student center, so we did have a place to go. There were classrooms, the student center, and there might have been a couple of administrative offices, but that was about it. There was a playing field in the back of the gymnasium, which was attached to the classroom building, which was an old building. But the gymnasium was just for practice and for intramural stuff. You didn't play any, school games there or anything. Baseball field was, I believe, Quigley Field and Painter Park is where we had to practice and play. So we didn't have our own baseball field or anything. But you know what? Nobody thought anything about it. You made it work somehow, some way, and you just, drove a short distance and you worked out and you played. But, there was no strength and conditioning coaches, very few trainers. But, it was baseball, and we all loved it, and we played. And Coach V had a program in the wintertime where he would challenge everybody to play basketball to stay in shape. And, he's a renowned basketball guy. And it was back then. You look at it, it's easy to say, well, it wasn't quite up to par. But for those times, it was fine. You made it work, and they took good care of both stadiums that we played in. And, we were fine. So looking back on it, no regrets at all. It was great. It actually brought us close because we changed at the school, go down to the park, come back to the school, change, take a shower, and then go to our various apartments that we had rented.
That Coach, J.W. and I are always talking about favorite movies, and a number of those are, baseball movies, from The Natural to The Love of the Game to Sandlot, and as you tell those stories, sometimes I feel like we've almost lost something in the translation between then and now. And of course, it's everything we turn on the TV and everything's glorious and beautiful and so on and so forth. But baseball in particular has a history of, my family comes from the Midwest. It's what the farmers played after a picnic. They had little old gloves and go out and literally watch a bunch of old guys swat the ball around and throw it around. And we've kind of lost those days.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, you go back to the days even during college playing in the summer leagues, it was called amateur baseball. But you're right, Doc. You just went to a park and you wore your uniform. You made some semblance of batting practice and infield practice. You played a game. And, you thank God at the time that there was some place to play because there were no travel leagues, all the AAA leagues and all this stuff. It was we had a guy in Waterbury by the name of Jim Spahn who worked in a factory but put a baseball team together every summer. And we'd go to Long Island, we'd go to Bridgeport, we'd go to New Haven, we'd go everywhere and just play, every weekend. And it was almost like barnstorming because there was music going on. They were passing the hat. But you're right. You put the bat, I think you put the glove on the bat and the shoes and just carried over to the ballpark. So same as the Midwest.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I have found this part of the country, and I'd heard so much about the Cape Cod League. and had a friend back home that spent his summers up here for years and years as an assistant coach on one of the teams, and still hope that my youngest son may have a shot to be in that league, or I'm getting, what is the other league, J.W, right under it, the Connecticut New England League, and
Yep.
The group that the Bees are a part of.
Yep, that's the future. Yeah, the Futures Collegiate
Yeah.
Baseball League.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's good stuff. And I kind of, for my son, I just want him to have that experience as close to what you've experienced as I can get him. And maybe even that's single A minor league baseball. Just riding around in a bus and making a little bit of money, and just playing again for the love of the game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's a very, very, very great experience. I think you learn to appreciate the purity of the game, and hopefully you have enough veterans on a team that you can learn how to play from. I think the biggest drawback to New England is the weather. You always say, I mean, you're playing from maybe mid-May by the time the weather breaks to the end of August and September. And, I did leave out talking about Coach V in New Haven. At that time, he was ahead of the curve because we were playing 25, 30 games in the fall, which the weather was real conducive to playing. So, we go down and play St. John's and Sacred Heart and some of these other schools where a lot of other teams weren't doing that. So he made a way that we could play a lot of games that didn't count per se in the record when the spring, but it gave us experience to play. Often the same as back in those days we're talking about, just amateur teams traveling and having fun.
We're recording this podcast on September the 3rd. I mentioned that not only for posterity reasons, but also to let our audience know that the biggest news in baseball today and yesterday when the news broke is the passing of Tom Seaver, a Hall of Fame pitcher, won 2 World Series titles with the Mets, 3-time Cy Young Award winner. And Dave, someone I know that you were very, very close to. So Dr. Z and I certainly extend our condolences. Where were you when you heard the news that Tom Terrific passed away?
Well, I was scrolling through my phone last night, and I knew I talked to Gary Thorne a couple of months ago, and I knew his health was declining and had been for about a year and a half, but it's still kind of sudden. So it hits pretty hard, because you lose an icon of the game, someone who is so well respected, not only for his pitching, but for his professionalism and his humanity, his caring about people, his willing to pass the torch to younger guys, and Tom had a vineyard, and he's a wine lover. So, and I know he would want everybody to celebrate his life. And but I was so lucky my few years in New York with the Mets to get to know him a little bit and talk about pitching. And I remember one time, one thing comes to memory that I'll never forget is Steve Phillips was the general manager, and Bobby Valentine, of course, from Connecticut, was the manager, and Tom was in town. And we were talking about the biomechanics of pitching and the delivery and all that stuff. And we just said, well, let's just go down for a minute in the video room and look at some deliveries and some mechanics over the years. And I'm telling you, the 4 of us sat there for, my guess is 4 hours, which didn't seem like 20 minutes. And at the time, there wasn't the technology we have now, but Bobby V was ahead of the curve. He had everything digitized on a computer, and we went through almost every part of the human anatomy. And as far as throwing a baseball from a rubber to home plate, 60 feet, 6 inches, and Tom's input and Steve and Bobby and myself, it's one of those things I'll treasure forever. And you can't put a price on it, So, yeah, it's a tough day for baseball in general, but I think Tom would want us to celebrate. That being said, I want to show you something. See if I can get this on. This is a bottle of, it says GTS. It's from the Diamond Mountain District in Napa, which is where Tom had his vineyard, and the GTS on it is George Thomas Seaver. So I'm going to open this tonight and celebrate the fact that he was such a wonderful guy, great baseball guy, and something that we can all learn from. And it's probably the greatest thing you could say about somebody is that he was a great pitcher, but a better human being.
Yeah, well said. I think we'll all raise a glass in remembrance of Tom Terrific. One more question about him, but before we move on, What else did he teach you? Because I know you've learned a lot. You picked up things from many people in your 51 years in baseball. Is there something specific you remember that he taught you?
Well, two things. One of the things that Tom was known for, drop and drive, and always had that patch of dirt on his knee. And one of the things, and not to name drop or do anything like that, but one of my greatest mentors and to this day greatest friends is that Jewish guy from New York, number 32, Mr. Koufax. So he always talked about the right way to throw a baseball using your lower half and all that. And it wasn't drop and drive. And that day that we had the meeting with the video with Bobby and Tom and Steve Phillips, I remember distinctly Tom saying, "I don't drop and drive. I'm using the lower half of my body. That's a result of what I do." And that made so much sense to me and really validated some of the things we believe and still teach. Number one. Number two, Tom talked about the mental part of the game. How out there he wanted to, especially later on in his career, he knew he couldn't throw 94 to 96 or whatever the gun said in those days every pitch, but he mastered command. You know, he had command of his fastball in the lower half of the strike zone, knew when to elevate, and also said, pick your spots. There's probably 5 or 6 times in a game as a starting pitcher when you must execute, you must get it out. And later went on to show us video and explain. He said, I knew at this point in the game, it was like a 5th inning of a playoff game. He had to reach back and maybe get 2 or 3 extra miles an hour. He said, well, that's one of the things younger pitchers have to learn as they pitch 4, 5, 6, 7 years in the major leagues, especially starters. When to reach back, when to get what's there, how to keep the tank full to its capacity, but don't empty it too soon because, you know, guys don't go those 7, 8, 9 innings in complete games anymore. So I just never forget him talking about that in the mental aspect. And he was just such a cerebral pitcher as well as gifted physically.
You know, I know I'm aging, as I think it was last night when it went across the crawl that he had passed. And I've rarely done this. You know, I remember my parents, when certain athletes or actors or actresses would pass away, they'd tell you a story about them. So I'm sitting there, I think we were watching basketball, and my wife and oldest son were sitting there, and something about his name when it went across, I just kind of gasped or whatever and said, "Dadgum, that was one of my heroes." You know, and you lose track of people as life goes on, and we get older and they get older, and I wasn't aware of his illness, so, you know, didn't see it coming. And it just threw me back to memories of watching him on TV when we had 2.5 channels in my hometown. And, you know, you're lucky if you,
yeah, right.
You know, he was on more than others because, you know, the teams he played for and how good he was. But I also had his baseball card, you know, and it sounds crazy. I haven't talked about baseball for years, but he was one of my favorite baseball cards, you know, and it's just a flashback last night. Time stood still for a moment.
Yeah, it really does, you know, and it's funny how you go, oh my God, you know, he was just here and he was such a shining light and all those Met pitchers, and all of a sudden this time goes by and wow, where does it go? But we try to treasure what we have and thank God for, you know, our acquaintances and keep getting to know one another and enjoy our company and pass everything down as he did. And those, so it's really, it's a blessing to have been involved with people like that.
Yeah.
Dave, I mentioned that you pitched at the University of New Haven. You pitched for a time in the major leagues. You were a pitcher in the minor leagues. How did you make that transition to become a pitching coach? Because I don't think many sports fans know how to become a pitching coach. How did it work out for you?
Oh, well, I wish there was a formula, but you know what, J.W., thinking back on it, you know, this was pre-free agency, pre all the strikes, all that stuff. And I had played about 10 years in the minor leagues with a few cups of coffee in the major leagues. And, you know, you couldn't become a minor league free agent. You were just kind of stuck with the team you had. So, gosh, I think I ended up at 32 or 33 years old. And I knew it was the end of my career as far as pitching because they weren't going to hold on to guys like me just to go back to AAA and be a, you know, insurance policy. But what I did learn over the years is that I truly had a passion for pitching, and coming from New England, didn't realize how much I didn't know. And that's not a knock on New England. It's not a knock on anything other than, when you're just a kid growing up in the 60s, the art of pitching is not discussed that much in the Waterbury, Connecticut. So I learned so much over the years and just had a knack for helping younger guys. I remember I was in Syracuse, I think in 1978 or 79, playing AAA for the Blue Jays, and Danny Ainge was on the team as a baseball player. And he was going over in the morning and playing basketball with Boeheim in Syracuse, but coming back. So, being older than Danny, I realized that, he appreciates the information and the help. So, and many other guys too, many other young kids coming up. And I had played, I think, 4 years in winter ball down in the Dominican, 2 or 3 years in Venezuela 1 year. And I didn't master, but I kind of learned the Spanish language and, more importantly, the Spanish culture. And when I got into coaching, I realized that I could speak enough Spanish to, help the young Latin players out, which was so important back then. So when I put all that together, I just said, the scout who signed me was named Dick Teed from Windsor, Connecticut. And he was working with the Dodgers, and he goes, "Hey, do you have interest in being a pitching coach?" I said, "Gee, never thought of it. Yeah, I'd like to try." So he set up an interview, and I was interviewed and hired that year and went to work in 1981 in Vero Beach in the Florida State League, and just realized that was, I had taught school in the off season, so I guess teaching and being in baseball put those together, and little did I know, what it would turn into. But again, blessed, fortunate to come up in the Dodger organization where, I can't tell you the names you stand around a pitching mound and listen to. But yeah, so that's kind of how it evolved, J.W. and Dr. Z. There's no magic formula. It's kind of luck, really. So worked out pretty good.
I could talk to you all day about that. I feel like we ought to be sitting over here at the corner pub and just, with either a soda or a beer or a coffee, and just and get down into your stories and the nuances of. I know that when I transitioned from being a player to a coach at a place called Drake University, that was a huge shock of what I didn't know. I mean, you go into every game as a player thinking we're going to win, we're supposed to win. You never that you might be outmatched, and that the coaches are spending all their time trying to either help you to win or minimize the loss, which was a tough pill for me to swallow. But just 15 years of coaching and 30 years in this business, and I still don't know my game, which is football, to the level I wish I did. The detail, and you specialize as you're a pitching coach. I'm kind of a running back receiver coach, but compared to what an O-line coach needs or a quarterback coach needs to know, it gets so intricate anymore. You just don't roll the ball out. It's like doing a fine dance, every game,
You're so right, because as a player, you just said it. I agree 100%. You're self-concerned. What can I do? What do I get better? As a coach, you better figure out how to help somebody and break everything down. You go, oh my God, I wish I could have taught myself that. And it is incredible how much you learn when you have to teach.
Yeah.
So,
I joke with the guys on this show. Everyone always asks what position to play. Well, I was a quarterback. I was an option quarterback, which means I was a quarterback that couldn't throw very well, and I could run a little bit. So running back. And, you go through that, and I look back years later and go, no one ever told me I was really a strong safety. I was out of my whole career.
Right.
I might have lasted longer, but had I had the coaching brain at that time, I'd have switched myself over, but never did. Little things like that. It's funny to talk about now, but I didn't have a clue.
Oh yeah. You know what? Before I forget, I'll take you guys up on that. Let's get together. I mean, I'd love to come down and go even have a glass of beer or wine or coffee, and let's sit in the corner and just shoot the bull about all this stuff, because that's so much fun. I mean, I'd love to get to know all that stuff, and it's just something happens good, and you never know what it comes out of it. But hopefully we can follow up on that.
You know what? We got some places for you down by the sand, and there's a big
okay
in my backyard. And
all right.
Nice. We can end up there.
Okay. Maybe you can talk my wife into letting me get a boat.
Hey,
you don't want to do that? I don't know. We'll see, honey.
Even got a dealer we can introduce you to.
Oh, okay. I'm in.
Okay.
You spent half the year in Florida, Dave. I'm surprised you don't have a boat already.
Yeah, half the year in Florida working. J.W., that's what I tell her. We go to spring training, stay at her house. I'm there about 3 weeks in January, then I go. And
Yeah.
she has her sisters and her family and this kid and that kid. Hey, enjoy it, honey. I got to go to work. Well, I'm sorry. But, you go ahead. Just let me know when you come back. So,
That sounds like a great marriage.
Yeah. Oh, hey, believe me now, she's going, don't you have something to do? Yeah. Oh,
Been there.
okay. Oh, yeah.
Dave, you mentioned a couple minutes ago, you mentioned Sandy Koufax. What did he teach you? What did you learn from him?
We don't have time on this thing to go into it, but he did a thesis, I believe it was 1972, with stick figures. And I want to say the University of Arizona, some professor out there, about the biomechanics of throwing a baseball properly. And I'll never forget it. I mean, it was just crude. It was stick figures. But when you get to be around him and talk to him, he's such a humble, private human being. And you just figured, like everybody else, he's just so gifted. That's why he was great. But he's so intelligent and so smart that he wanted to figure everything out. And what happened was, back in those days, if you got, I think it was $4,000 or more of a bonus, you had to stay in the big leagues. So he went from, I think it was the University of Cincinnati or Xavier, one of the schools he went to play basketball at, had a tryout with the Dodgers. They signed with that bonus. He went right to the big leagues, and first 5 or 6 years had to figure stuff out on his own. And he did. And as we all know, those last 6 or 7 years, probably the most dominant years in the history of the game. But from grips on a fastball to how to utilize the lower half of your body, from placement of feet on the rubber and, rotation on a curveball, which they call spin rate now. Reminds me to tell you a story about one of the little Ivy League interns I ran into last year in spring training. It was quite revealing, but good. But anyway, he had so much knowledge of what to do, and always people talk about throwing, to the corners of the plate or to the black on the outer rim of the plate. And I remember Sandy saying, and you know how the plate is shaped. He goes, I wanted to throw to the back corner, not the front corner. I'm going, holy mackerel, what is this? So just so much of that stuff, and the competitiveness in him, which you'd never know, because if you sat with him and talked with him, he's so mild-mannered and soft-spoken and humble. But during the game, I saw him one time lose it in a fantasy camp game, and he was still pitching. He was around 52, and those guys regret that they upset him. But and constantly to this day, probably 3, 4 times, 5 times a year get together, because he's in Vero Beach in the wintertime and up in Pennsylvania in the summer, stay in contact and talk pitching. And I think every place I was, I'm trying to think, maybe except Baltimore, that he came to spring training and sat, and all the guys just gathered around and talk about pitching. And, it's just, like I said, I can go on and on and on with specifics, but I don't know how it happened, but we hit it off and became pretty close. And he's just such a wonderful man to talk to about pitching, even in this day and age. And, told us about Kershaw before he came on the scene, told us about Buehler before he came on the scene, and just, has had an impact on so many people that he will never admit to.
Is pitch, Dave, in your opinion, Dave, is pitching an art or a science?
It's both. It is an art and it is a science. And, my saying is this, see if I can remember it right. The pitching is the constant strive for perfection with the realization you will never achieve it. So you're trying to make every pitch perfect, but you better have a mindset that you're not going to be perfect. And even if you are, the guy's going to hit that flare and it's going to fall in just behind the first baseman's head in fair territory and go for a double. So how do you react to that? Or you're going to give up a line drive to left center field, and the center field is going to run the ball down and catch it, and you're going to say, oh, that's an out, instead of saying I made a bad pitch and got away with a mistake. So it is that constant strive for perfection, but you better realize that you're not going to do it. You ask anybody what a perfect game is, and they'll tell you, 27 outs, no runs, no runs, no hits, nobody on base. That's not a perfect game. Is 27 pitches, if you really want to come down to it. So, it's with all the technology today, which is great. I mean, that's the science of it. All those numbers are wonderful, but the art of it is probably lost in this day and age, guys, because, I look at the Glavins of the world. I look at the guys that don't throw that hard anymore. The kid in Chicago, I can't think of his name, with the Cubs. But these guys can pitch. And, Mark Burley, who pitched with the White Sox and the Blue Jays, never threw 86, 88. So the art of pitching is not there anymore the way it used to be, because guys are so big and so strong and throw so hard. But the backup of the technology and the scientific part of it, it's really good, because what it does in its simplest form, it validates some of the stuff that Sandy taught us and Johnny Padres taught us and Paranowski and Palmer and Seaver and these guys taught over the years, but it's just said in a much more sophisticated way. And the numbers back a lot of that stuff up. The story I was going to tell about this young intern, I think it was a year ago in spring training, one of our younger pitchers was learning how to throw a curveball. Actually, it was Ian Anderson, who just had two pretty good starts for the Braves against the Yankees and the Red Sox. 22-year-old kid. He was coming out of high school in New York State. But anyway, Ian was throwing aside, working on his curveball, trying to get a little bit rate of rotation and spin and all that stuff. So the young intern had this camera called a Edgertronic camera behind the mound, where it can slow down the ball coming out of the pitcher's hand to the point you can count revolutions. So I said to the young guy, he goes, oh yeah, he's got to increase his, rate of spin and all that stuff. I said, how many times do you think the ball rotates from the time it leaves the pitcher's hand until it gets to the catcher's glove? And he goes, oh my God, I don't know, 150, 200, which is natural, and everybody would say that. And I said, I'll tell you what, let's count them, because it's probably not more than 13. He goes, what? I said, just trust me, it's about 13 times a ball takes a full rotation by the time it leaves the pitcher's hand and gets to the catcher. And sure enough, he captures it on tape. And we're counting, here I am, 73 years old, counting revolutions on the baseball in spring training. But I think it was 13 and a half or 14 times the ball actually rotated. So if you can get a young pitcher to get one extra revolution, it makes his curveball spin faster. Okay, not throw it harder, spin it faster. As a result of spinning faster, gets through the hitting zone quicker, makes it harder to hit. So we broke it down that way. And he looked at me like said, oh my God. I said, I appreciate the information, but it was done in a different way over the years. We didn't know how to get there, but thank you for clarifying that we've been doing this the right way over the years. So just a quick side bet. So it was interesting. Yeah.
That's
great.
Good stuff.
You should
Yeah,
be. You should be teaching in an Ivy League school with stuff like that, Dave.
Well, you know what? If I get the right situation, I'm probably going to go help out at a college somewhere. So we'll see.
It could maybe happen somewhere.
Okay, I'm in.
Hey, I'm not often speechless on these shows, but there's something about the what you just described that as a former coach, and I never want to be former, I consider myself current, even though I'm in administration or front office right now. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, that, the memories I have with the coaches I came up with. My first mentor, a man named Lou Lane, who passed away this past year, at a high school, a legendary high school in Kansas. We'd sit around a table all night long and talk about the way you just did. And we didn't have all the technology. My next job was at Drake, as I talked about. And I'm thankful that I was the last of the era of when it's time to cut up film, not tape. You cut it up and you had to put it together with clothespins. And you know what? As a young coach, you understood in football language how to break down the game from a first and long, a second long, first and 10, second and long, second medium, second and short, third and long, third and medium, third and short, fourth and long, fourth and medium, fourth and short, fourth and goal. It's different than somebody plugging in a computer for you and it's spitting out and you hand the forms to your position coach or coordinator. What you did old-fashioned way is what I learned how to do it the old-fashioned way. And you don't forget those lessons. You feel it. You don't just know it, you feel it.
Right. That's a good way to put it, Doc. You feel them. And you know from your experience going through that, putting those things together piece by piece. And you can see it, you can feel it, you can teach it. And, I feel blessed to have the experience. And I'll tell you my quick story, if you don't mind me getting off here for a second. But you make so much sense because in today's world, where all the older coaches in all the sports are getting ousted and bringing in these young guys. And you know what? I understand. I get it. And that information is wonderful. But this happened when I was going through what Kawhi Leonard went through as a free agent. And I'll get to the gist of it. The reason he went to the Clippers, from my understanding, I know a lot of people on the West Coast from my time there, is he wanted to talk to Jerry West. Jerry West is what, probably 82 now? Just experienced basketball player, maybe perhaps ever, all that stuff. But it made me think, Jerry West, the best basketball guy, lured one of today's modern players to come and join his team. And then I go to, okay, college football. Who's the best coach? The guy in Alabama. He's almost 70, 68 years old. Professional football. Who's the best coach? The guy up here. 68, 69 years old. They take experience, they take the new technology, all the information, and they don't necessarily spit it out, but they use old school, some kind of structure, new school information, and find their personalities come together and they teach it. Basketball, Popovich, in the NBA, he's 72. You can go on and on and on and on. So there's such value in those guys to do all that stuff. And where's the experience now? The experience is, to me, Pat Riley still basically runs the Heat. So, when anybody asks me about experience, I'll just say, you know what, let's really look at the elite programs and see who's running them, because you can break most of that down and there's some kind of experience there.
Coach, I'll go a step further. As a guy who, ended my coaching career in administration, I know lots of coaches who didn't make it. Those who do make it into the upper echelons of age, they're the best. They're the best of the best. And I would add to it for our viewers, especially when you're watching football, if you see a young coach, head coach on the sidelines, look behind him on the sideline, and you're going to see a couple of old coordinators prowling up and down the sideline. The young coach connects with the players, and that's great. I'm all for it. But there's a couple of old hats back there calling the plays. And it's single time, every single time.
Oh, the defensive guy, Wade Phillips, right?
Yeah.
He's never going to want for a job.
Nope.
And his value, like you say, to that young coach is you can't measure it. You just
That's
can't.
Right.
So, anyway, sorry about the sidebar, but had to get it in
Sorry, J.W., did we leave you out there for a second?
No, we're just leaving, it's just a crazy game in all sports now today. And when you look at the experience around and the young guys, I get it. But boy, oh boy, Coach, as you know, whether it's today's athlete or yesterday's, whether it's a superstar or not, guys want structure and they want somebody to stand up and say no.
I'm learning. John and Rob are in the background laughing because I'm kind of known for resisting technology to a certain level, and it's a little bit of an act. I can turn on my computer and do a Zoom call here and stuff like that. John has to bail me out once in a while when I push the wrong button. But way back, a program I was really close to, a coach had succeeded one of my mentors, and this coach was talking about how he had gotten Blackberries for his staff. I'm dating this, and how that was going to do this and that. And I just couldn't resist telling people, I've never seen a BlackBerry get a first down, you know?
No. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wish there was a formula, a book written on how to do all this, but there's not. It's like you said, Coach, it's a feel. It's a feel. Yeah. And first of all, it's the personality of so many guys. You have the guy, the number 1 draft pick out of Vanderbilt, who's really smart and really advanced. And then you have the 32nd round pick out of a high school in South Dakota somewhere who's played 5 high school games. Yep. So you better know your audience and who you're talking to. And timing, I think, is one of the most important things when it comes to coaching. I always said, don't shoot the gun unless it's loaded. Take your time and study the player. So when that player, you have something to say, or if he even asks you, then you have a student. But if he has something to say and you jump in right away, he's going to say, wait a minute, you haven't even seen me. What are you talking about? So to me, it's patience, know your audience, study the player, learn what you have to learn, ask him for some input if it's an advanced player, and then open it up to the conversation. And all of a sudden you get a welcoming from whoever it is. It could be a superstar. It could be just a young guy who's the 12th man on your pitching staff. It doesn't matter.
You are tuned into the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. Our guest today is Dave Wallace, who pitched for us at the University of New Haven. He's in our Athletics Hall of Fame and has spent 51 years in baseball at a variety of levels and a variety of jobs. For those of us who've watched and tuned into this podcast before, this is no secret. I'm a Red Sox fan, so I've been waiting to ask this question. I probably could have led with this question. I think I've been pretty patient and reserved.
Don't tell me it's what happened in 03 with Pedro. Don't tell me that.
I was not going to bring that up. I was going to focus on 04.
Okay, good, perfect. We're good.
You can. But that stuff's in the rearview mirror. But for myself and my family and friends who've been Red Sox fans for years and years and years, up until 2004, we knew nothing but heartbreak. So when you were in the dugout, when they finally got the final out there in St. Louis, when they swept the Cardinals in 04, what was it like? Because I know what it was like for me as a fan to finally win it. What was it like for you to actually be there? What was that moment like when the Red Sox won their first World Series in 86 years?
Well, you know what, JW, it's hard to explain because there's such a sense of, accomplishment and happiness and what you've done. But also, as Coach would know, you're so involved in the process. It was almost like a relief, not to have to think about who's coming to bat, what pitcher you're going to use. What if we get beat today? Who's going to pitch tomorrow? We got to save this guy in case we need a long relief pitcher tomorrow. We can't burn this guy out. So it was just a relief, but also a sense of, I cannot believe we did this. And I'm one of those fatalists that believe in, the good Lord above and has everything for a reason. And after going through 03 to come back in 04 and be down 3 games to the Yankees, I mean, that's the thing that got me more than anything. So I think that drained all of us. I remember we had an incident after game 3 up at Fenway Park, and I think the score was crazy. It was like 19-6 or stuff. We really got blown out. And, very naive me, I said, well, I hope we can win one because the owners will get another gate. I'm going, okay, yeah. But, we ended up just coming back and winning that. And that's the thing. I remember more about that, going into Yankee Stadium, being down 3-2 and then tying it up 3-3 and then coming back. And Johnny Damon goes yard, I think, in the 2nd inning with a grand slam. And you just kind of knew that was more satisfying for me after going through what we went through in 03 and looking over in the dugout and seeing those Yankee guys standing up on the rail in the dugout. And you see the look on their faces. We just like, finally, just finally it happened. So, that it's just such a combination of emotions. It's hard to put into perspective, and you're drained emotionally because you're in both feet, both hands, everything into trying to figure out your pitching staff and your team and what to do. So you just hang your head in relief, and then you jump for joy and you go have a glass of champagne and just say, I cannot believe we just did this. So I mean, it's the greatest comeback ever, and you don't even realize it till a year later. So it was quite exciting.
You mentioned Pedro. Give us your best Pedro Martinez story, and I'm sure you have a million to choose from.
Well, I mean, I can give you a major league story, a minor league story, because Pedro came up with the Dodgers. I had his brother Ramon. I was in LA when Ramon was with the big league club, and Pedro was coming up. And let's see. I'll tell you what, we'll cover a bunch of them when we come down and have that beer. But probably the most revealing to know after experience. I was a pitching coordinator. I think whatever. Yeah, I think it was like 1992, maybe 93, one of those years. Pedro was in his first or second year in the organization, 16 or 17-year-old kid. He was playing at Great Falls, Montana, which was our rookie league. Okay, at that time, Great Falls, Montana gets in the playoffs, and they're playing a team in Salt Lake City. Now, the team in Salt Lake City was an independent team, much like the Bridgeport team down there was. But anyway, the independent team had, they could sign anybody they want. They had no affiliation to an organization. So they had 24, 25, 26-year-old kids who had been released from A-ball, AA, AAA, whatever, still wanting to play. And they just ran through the league, beat everybody. So as fate would have it, I go in to watch the playoffs. First game of the playoff is being played in Salt Lake City. And I'm sitting behind the plate watching the game, and sitting next to me is Pedro. He's got the pitching chart because he's pitching the next night. And the score, I think they just kicked our butt. It was like 15-1 or 16-0, some just crazy stuff. And the game's over, and Pedro and I are walking back to our clubhouse, and he had a look on his face. And I said, "What's the matter, man?" He goes, "I got this." I said, "What?" He goes, and he had that look of, I talk about Larry Bird, those guys, they have a look, and you just see. I said, "Oh, something's up here." So the next night, placed myself behind the plate. First pitch of the game, he throws one chest high. This guy falls on his back. It just makes a statement and goes on. I think he struck out 14. Comes back, win the game, and I just said, "Okay, you don't see it. That's special." So at that point, you just go, this guy is something special. I mean, he was, 5'10", 165 pounds at that time. But the look in his eye and to do what he did and carry out that, at that moment, you just said, "Okay, oh, now I know." And he was something, boy. And one other time, this is a couple years later, he's gonna make the team. He's gonna make the LA team, and he's I think the last day of spring training, the Dodgers go out on the waiver wire and they get like a veteran reliever. Pedro was gonna make the team as a relief pitcher, not as a starter. So, I'm real close to the family. And last day of spring training, he gets sent to the minor leagues. So his brother Ramon said to me, "Pedro won't come out of his room." In Dodgertown, everybody had their own room, spring training. He's really upset. So I said, "Okay, my battery got low, sorry." Pedro gets upset. He's in a fetal position in bed in his room in Dodgertown. And I go in there and he goes, "Get out of here. Come on." He called me viejo, which is old man. And that was at that time. So you can imagine what he calls me now. But he says, and he was really, he goes, "Don't tell me I'm not one of the better guys. I should have made that club." Yet I said, "Pedro, so okay, go ahead. Prove him right. Prove him right that they sent you down for a reason because you're not ready to handle this." And I kind of laid into him pretty good. He goes, "Thank you, viejo." And then, he gets up, gets out of bed, goes to the AAA team. 2 weeks later, gets called to the big leagues and stayed there that whole year. And they traded him the year after that, which was crazy. We won't get into that. But, he was just so sensitive, so emotional, could come off and rub people the wrong way. But got a heart of gold, would never turn down an autograph or do something for somebody. Actually built a city in his hometown in the Dominican where he's got a school system, a police department, a stadium, athletics, churches, everything. So he's quite a guy.
Wow.
Yep. Petey.
Yep.
Little Pedro.
He's the best.
He is. You know what? He's a genius. He is a genius on the mound. He really is. He and Greg Maddux are two of the guys that just, they'll tell you what they're going to do before they go out there the next inning, and you go, really? I mean, again, it's probably getting short here, but one more quick one. We're playing the playoffs in 2003 against Oakland, 2004, whatever year it was. And we're down, must have been 2003 because we didn't have a closer because Derek Lowe was in the game, closing the game in Oakland. We had a 1-run lead in the 9th inning, 2 outs, switch hitter pinch hits for, forget who he pinch hit for, but the pinch hitter's Adam Melhuse, left-handed hitter off Derek Lowe. Derek had a real good sinker. So there's 2 outs. We got 1 out left to go, and the count gets to 1-1. Pedro's down the other end of the dugout, and I'm down in Oakland. The visitors' dugout's on first base, so you got to sit down by the plate so you can get a hold of the catcher, Veritek, if something came up. So Pedro comes running down at 1-1 count. He goes, "Viejo." I said, "What?" He goes, "If it goes to 2-2, have Jason Veritek call a front door sinker. In other words, a ball that comes into a left-hander from a right-hander looks like it's going to come in here, and then it sinks, comes back over for a strike." He says, "If it gets to 2-2, tell Derek to throw him a front door sinker. He'll take it for strike 3. Okay, yeah, right. I mean, everybody's excited. Sure enough, the count gets to 2-2. Tech calls a front door sinker. Millhouse goes like this, takes it, comes back for a strike. I mean,
that's a great story, Dave. That is a tremendous story. Yeah.
So
Petey's one of a kind. He's one of the characters of the game.
Yeah, he is.
Dr. Z, anything else for Dave before we let him go? He's been very gracious with his time, and we only really scraped the tip of the iceberg here.
I hate to do this to the viewers, but we're going to save the best for when we're out by the fire pit because for a couple more hours. This is exactly what I was talking about. And, you know, when you and I dreamed up this podcast months ago, this is the very kind of thing, J.W., we were talking about. We've had all kinds of guests, and we go inside UNH, outside UNH, athletics, once in a while away from athletics, but this is the best of the best. This is the meat on the bone in sports. If you like sports, I don't care what sport it is. This is for me. This is what makes coaching and playing and being around it great. So thanks, Coach. This was awesome.
Oh gosh, God, thank you guys. I appreciate it so much, and we'll follow up. We'll figure something out here because. I mean, what they say, you're at that point in your life where you got to spend your time foolishly and your money foolishly and your time wisely.
There you go.
Love it.
There you go.
Love it. We wish you a happy birthday, Dave. Dave turned 73 on Monday, so happy birthday to you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for giving that away.
No. Thanks, Dave. We'll see you soon.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate
Take care.
it.
As we say goodbye to Dave Wallace, I just want to remind all of our alums in the audience, of course, Dave is one of our UNH alums, about the upcoming Centennial Ball. It's the weekend of October 3rd, so we're about a month away. Held virtually this year, that first weekend of October, that Saturday is the big day, October the 3rd. We want to encourage all of our alumni to register. The cost is very reasonable, just $25 per person. It promises to be a memorable evening of student showcases, entertainment, live auction. We'll have more details here on the podcast in the next couple of weeks and also on our website. Your support through the Centennial Ball will help us get closer to meeting and hopefully even succeeding our ambitious $120 million Charger Challenge goal, which is part of the overall campaign for the University of New Haven. For more information on the virtual Centennial Ball or to register, please visit our website, newhaven.edu/alumni. Dr. Z, your thoughts on Dave Wallace? He is just a tremendous storyteller.
I was hoping, I didn't, I was hoping for something, and this was even better. And he just took me back in time. Memories of my favorite coaches I played for and started out coaching with, and the stories he told. I wish we had him in a class of young coaches or young people who want to be coaches, and that's what it's all about right there. It's not about the glitz and the glitter that you see on TV. It's really about the guts of the game and the beginnings of the game, or whatever sport it is, and that's why I went into business, is what you saw right there.
Yeah, and Dave, the stories that he told are phenomenal. The people he's met, right, the connections he's made, to be able to talk about Sandy Koufax and Johnny Padres and Tom Seaver. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about Tommy Lasorda or Oral Hershiser or Kurt Schilling, right, or David Ortiz. I mean, he knows all these guys. When you've been in baseball for that long, 51 years, he knows everybody. So he's a great man. It was great to have him on the show. I know our producer Broccoli Rob Thompson is in the back. I don't know if Rob has the opportunity to pop out, but certainly Rob is in our Hall of Fame, just as Dave is in our Hall of Fame. And Rob, I wanted to get your opinions on Dave Wallace, because you've been associated with the school longer, certainly, than Dr. Z and John and I have. Have you met Dave over the years? Have you talked to him in years past?
No, but he was certainly someone we knew about back in the 80s when we played. And I think the telling sign of all of that was UNH was a very regional school back then. Mm-hmm. It was a very homegrown. That was the place, kind of, if you're a Connecticut guy, you want to play athletics, man, guy or girl, want to play athletics. I know how to catch myself in that one. UNH was a viable option for all of us. And that wasn't just in the 60s. It carried on through the 90s as well, and certainly today. So it's good to see another Connecticut guy that has done so well, especially in pro sports. But I got to be honest with you, that guy was a great coach, is a great storyteller. Yeah, great storyteller. So I don't know if 2 hours is going to be enough, Z.
No, it won't be. We're talking 4 or 5. This could be an all-nighter.
Yeah. Yeah, when Dave does come to campus, I'm not sure that interview will be recorded. There might be some off-the-record stories. No. Hey, Rob, before we let you go, quick update for our alumni on the Centennial Ball. Anything that you want to say to our alums who are tuned into the podcast right now?
Yeah, so Friday, Saturday, it's going to be a kind of 2 nights for us. On Friday, we're going to do a sort of a telethon. It's going to be a kickoff for our PPC and our locker room campaign that we're going through, and there's going to be a lot of information, renderings of a new building, all that other good stuff that we're going to have different segments throughout the night on Friday. And then Saturday is going to be coaches and captains and a bunch of other content that's going to be Dr. Z will be there as well. And it's just going to be a really interesting, cool networking platform to reconnect, to learn a little bit more, and to certainly see what we're doing behind the scenes at the university, especially within the athletic department. So stay tuned for more information. If you're an alum, you really need to be there and be a part of this if you really do care about what we're doing here at the university.
Sounds good. Broccoli Rob, as always, thanks for joining us, and thanks for your hard work behind the scenes. We appreciate it. All right, final thoughts, Dr. Z, before we wrap up for the day? You're good?
That was magical. That was great. I got nothing. That was.
I'll say we are very lucky, very, very fortunate to have someone like Dave Wallace as a member of our UNH family and the Charger community, right? As an alum, as you said, we do with this inside outside, and we have a lot of people who've been very kind to join us on the program who are friends of the University of New Haven and our athletics department. But here's somebody who bled blue and gold for us and is in our Hall of Fame, and to have that connection, I think, is huge. And I can't wait for the time when we do get him back up to West Haven and back on campus. I think it'll be a thrill for Dave, and I think it'll be a thrill for everyone that he talks to.
Right.
Dr. Z, as always, thanks. Great job today, and thanks to Dave Wallace for joining us, for our executive producer, John Mays, and for producer Broccoli Rob Thompson. I'm J.W. Stewart for Dr. Z. Thanks for joining us here on the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.